Welcome. My name is Paul White. I'm formally my title is Vice President of Member Services. What we want to do today is to tell you about what's going on at Eclipse, within Eclipse, at the foundation, in terms of trying to provide a number of services to you, our members. We have an obligation to do this once a year as members, and as a member association. That's one of the parts of our governance. But in fact, it's a great opportunity for us to get together and talk about what we're doing, and more importantly, to hear from you about, are we doing the right things? So please feel free to ask questions of anybody who's going to speak. We have a packed agenda. We're going to try to get through all of this in an hour, right? And the idea mostly is we're just going to give some highlights in terms of what we're working on. And if you're interested in the subject, hunt us down, right? And we'll talk much more about it. So. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Mike and let him give his update, and we'll go from there.
Good morning, everybody. Everybody had their coffee? Everybody wide awake? All right, so who is still at the nest door at midnight? Anybody? All right. Anybody 1 o'clock? No? Good for you. All right, so first off, membership updates. Just tilt that a little bit sideways if you can, so yeah. So the big news, of course, from our perspective is that we have 2 new strategic members that joined the board of directors. Introduced them yesterday in the keynote. Huawei, of course, is a well-known Chinese company, and I think Brian's talk is 10. Is it tomorrow? It's Thursday, right? 10:15 tomorrow. So if you're interested in what they're planning on bringing to the Eclipse Foundation in the way of project proposals, that would be a good opportunity. And Conduit, a relatively new company, but the people that work there are the core committers on the Eclipse Deep Learning for J project. So very excited to have them join. One of the things that's a little bit different about the Eclipse Foundation is we make sure that all of our membership dues at every level are staggered so that small companies can join at higher levels if they want to. So what that means is, for example, some other open source foundations, it's like $300,000 flat to become the equivalent of a strategic member. And in our case, the big investment being a strategic member is actually committing to have 8 full-time developers working on Eclipse projects, which is, if you ever run an engineering organization, that's a big number. So we do have smaller companies on our board as well as larger companies. So Obeo, for example, is a good example of a company that's been on our board for many, many years. It's a relatively small company, and Conduit is joining them. So strategic members, there's the whole list. I'm sure you're familiar with many of those brands, and of course IBM and Red Hat in particular have been big supporters of Eclipse for many years. Bosch and their support for IoT has been instrumental in getting IoT off the ground as a community within Eclipse. And of course Oracle has been very important in terms of bringing Java EE over to Eclipse and Jakarta EE. So been working with the teams there quite a bit. Fujitsu is at the Eclipse Foundation specifically in support of the Jakarta EE initiative. So new solutions members, I'm not going to go through all of them. Just a couple I'm going to call out in particular. AVL joined largely because of our Open ADX working group. And if you haven't heard of them, they're in fact a multi-billion-dollar in the auto sector. I think would be referred to as a tier 2 engine testing. Yeah. A couple of new associate members. A lot of these are associated with working groups, so becoming active in various working groups, particularly as guest members. So welcome. And in terms of new working group members, we launched a brand new working group a couple of weeks ago called Eclipse Cloud Development Tools. So this is a working group that's in support particularly of projects like Theia and Che. And so Red Hat, of course, has been heavily investing in Che for a number of years, and even so far as acquiring Code Envy as a company 3 or 4 years back. Ericsson, behind the scenes, has been investing heavily in Theia. So they've been providing contracts to Typefox to move the Theia project forward. And but we're very happy that companies like Intel, SAP, Software, AG, and CA all have plans to use either Che or Theia in products. And so what we're really seeing here is a whole next generation of developer tools coming from the Eclipse Foundation for today's architectures based around cloud and web. Eclipse Edge, we're still sort of in the process of standing that up, but EdgeWorks and AD-Link are the companies that are behind the IO Fog and the Fog OS projects that are related to building out edge computing capabilities. And Intel and Kinetics have joined the working group, and we have definitely have several more in the pipeline. IoT, the Linux Foundation, that's specifically in support of the Zephyr project. So if you're familiar with this ecosystem of small embeddable operating systems that are being used in IoT use cases, Zephyr is one that's hosted at the Linux Foundation that they want to build a bridge between Eclipse IoT and Zephyr. Kichwa Coders and Aloxi are other IoT members. And then Sparkplug, again, is another working group that we're still in the process of standing up. What Sparkplug is actually a specification. And in particular, what it is it's a MQTT specification. So anybody knows IoT knows MQTT, and if you know MQTT, you know that it's a fast, lightweight protocol that says nothing about the content of what's in the payload. So there's no standardization of the topic structure. There's no standardization of how you represent the data. There's no standardization in terms of sort of how you start up and bring down servers or communications between servers. All of this is left as an exercise to the reader. And so what Sparkplug is trying to do is extend the MQTT protocol with a particular attention to the needs of industrial manufacturing equipment. And the dream is that you could buy industrial machinery from 3 or 4 different vendors and put them into your factory, and they would immediately be able to share data with one another, and you would immediately be able to implement data acquisition based off of the Sparkplug spec. I feel bad talking about this with Ralph in the room, but we have 3 new automotive working groups, and congratulations to Ralph for getting these all stood up in this last year, and I see some familiar faces from the automotive groups here in the room. So OpenGenesis and OpenADX are relatively new. OpenADX, I think in particular, is interesting in that they have a very grand vision of building an entire end-to-end tool chain for creating autonomous driving systems. And there's a huge amount of effort that goes into doing that around things like system verification and test, safety qualification of neural networks where humans don't understand how they work. It's a very much of an open question, but it's very much in the interest of all of us to make sure that's done right. Financial update. Basically, the numbers speak for themselves. The 2019 forecast is that we're going to bring in $6 million and spend 6.4. That was done at the beginning of the year with the expectation. We ramped up our headcount growth based on the expectations that we were going to be recruiting a bunch of new members, particularly around Jakarta. In the end, Jakarta ended up slipping at least 6 months from what we thought we were going to have when we did the budget a year ago, and so our expense growth overshot our revenue growth. I can say that having Huawei join in late in the year is definitely going to set us up for a better result next year. Governance renewal. So Eclipse Foundation has been in existence since 2004, and as an organization, we've completely changed in over 15 years. One of the big things is that originally, what did we do? We were a community that built plugins for a desktop IDE. That's what we did. Remember those fun days? And then actually very, very quickly RCP shipped, and then we became, in addition to that, then there was RCP, and then there was people that were building modeling tools, but very much it was all about tools. Now we have IoT, Jakarta. We're in the specifications game through Jakarta, things like Jakarta and Sparkplug and MicroProfile. And we're getting more projects in more new areas, and that's why Huawei joined us, is they're going to be bringing projects in yet more new areas. So we're very much becoming a big tent of open source projects and communities, and that's by design. We've been talking about this for a number of years at the board level, and this is definitely the direction that we want to go. And as part of that, we use more licenses than the EPL. So the original bylaws say, if you're going to use anything other than the EPL, unless you have a policy written into the IP policy, if it's anything other than EPL, then you have to have unanimous approval of the board. As we stand right now, something like 25% of the projects currently running at the Eclipse Foundation use licenses other than the EPL. Or in addition to the EPL. A lot of them are dual licensed. So we're becoming much more accepting of other licenses. And in particular, we have a lot of projects that are using Apache and BSD. And then the other thing we have to deal with is industry consolidation is impacting membership revenues, and that's something that I think every industry organization has to deal with in one way or another. So we started talking about this back in June and July and August. We got concrete changes out to the board in September, and we had a vote of the board on Monday, and the new bylaws were accepted by the board, which means that now you folks actually have to do something, which is we only do this about once a decade, but we actually have to run a vote of the membership at large. And here's the challenge. Our committers are members too, right? So, and the threshold that we have to reach is we have to get 50% of everybody who could possibly vote to vote, right? So if we get 50% minus 1, then all this work is for waste. And in addition, of the 50% who vote, we need to get 2/3 to say yes. So that's the bar we have to achieve. And so don't be, if you are a committer at Eclipse, expect a lot of emails in your inbox over the next little while saying, please vote. So please vote. You have more faith in our email generation than I do. Denis, is that true? It's true? That might happen. All right, that's awesome. The biggest and most important change to the bylaws is we are updating our purposes statement. And the original purposes statement, this has been there for 15 years. The purposes statement said that that we were about the Eclipse platform, where Eclipse platform tools are exemplary, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, the main point is that we are now an organization that provides vendor-neutral open development of open source technology, specifications, platforms, runtimes, frameworks, and tools. Basically everything, right? Thank you. I'm glad you noticed that. And the inclusion of the word specifications there, of course, is quite important, because that actually is quite a departure for us, and it is a big new area. But one of the key points that we're keeping is this last sentence, which hasn't changed at all. And that's actually been, I think, one of the key secret sauces of the Eclipse Foundation is the Eclipse Foundation as an organization. We wake up every day and we are thinking both about how to make our committers' lives better, like how to make our projects better, and how to make our members' businesses better. Oh. What have I done for Kai lately? You don't think so? We're dedicated bunch. You say so. Yeah. So anyway, so this is the most fundamental change, and it's a very important change, and I think it sets us up well for like the next 15 years. So affiliates. So the bylaws have been around for 15 years, and there's been a few times where we would like kind of tilt our head sideways trying to figure out what it is, what they actually mean. So what we did with this version of the bylaws, and I'm not going to go through every change here, but basically, we don't think we changed the bylaws in most regards with the affiliates. What we did is we wrote down explicitly the way we've been interpreting them for 15 years. Right, so the one exception to that is at the board level. Is there an actual slide on? Okay, so at the board level, we create a situation where if let's use IBM and Red Hat as an example. So Red Hat is still being operated as a separate legal entity, so they exist as a legal body. So if IBM and Red Hat each pay strategic membership dues, they can each have a seat on the board, but they only get one vote. Similarly, they can each have their own identity as a member of the Eclipse Foundation, but anytime we have a vote of the membership at large, they only get one vote. So the idea is that, and there's all kinds of good examples in business where it's worth the little bit of extra membership dues to have the separate corporate identity, recognizing committers from Red Hat versus recognizing committers from IBM, having two seats and being able to join in the conversations at the boards. We have very few votes of the board that are not unanimous anyways. So it's actually participating in the conversation and influencing the decision in that way that's actually basically as valuable as the vote itself. Except, I was getting there, in the case of working groups, then they can fully participate. So in the case of Jakarta EE, which is a concrete example, IBM and Red Hat can both remain strategic members of the Jakarta EE working group, vote, and fully participate as separate members of the Jakarta EE working group. Now down the road, if things evolve to the point where Red Hat is no longer a separate legal entity and it's just subsumed inside IBM, then of course then it's definitely just one. Does that make sense? That's very clear in the bylaws. If it's greater than 50%. So if you have 50.000001, then you control them, and that's actually how the real world works too. So yeah. So we actually changed a few things about where we need supermajority votes of the board. So we added approval of the specification process. So our bylaws have always said to approve the development process requires a supermajority. We're making the specification process sort of at the same level. We got some stuff that basically we haven't really done a lot. And we changed approval of outside counsel to general counsel. So it used to be, the board used to require a supermajority vote anytime we changed a PMC leader, which didn't really seem necessary. Various cleanups. So quarterly member meetings we're going to replace with quarterly reports, right? So we have quarterly member meetings that we do virtually in addition to this face-to-face one. They haven't been very well attended, but there's a lot of good content. So what we're going to do is rather than expect people to line up to some time that we're running it, we're just going to publish the material to all of our members instead. There's been a since day one, there's been a requirement in our bylaws that if you want to become a solutions member, enterprise member, or strategic member, you had to commit to shipping a commercial offering within 12 months. And that's just been no end of confusion. It turns out, by the way, commercial offering includes open source. Sometimes it's hard to convince people that that's true, but that's what our lawyers say. We already talked about affiliates. In the councils, we sort of tightened up the wording for the Architecture Council, and we are going to remove the Planning Council as something that's actually in the bylaws. And the reason why is, what does the Planning Council actually do? It runs the simultaneous release. And so that's a subset of all of our projects. The Planning Council doesn't actually have an interest in spanning everything that we do within the Eclipse Foundation. So we need everybody to vote. Morning. And we are going to get the ballots out starting next week. Please take the time to vote. I promise you it will not be painful. It will be click here in your email, click yes or no, and you're done. Yes, Kevin. Yeah, it's not straight up and down. Do you approve the changes to the bylaws, right? And so one of the things I got to do is one of the things we'll be providing you with is a version of the bylaws with every red line explained why we changed it, and then there'll be a slide version of the same thing. So we have I needed something to do on the airplane on the way home on Friday, so just in time documentation. And like I said before, we need 50% of everybody to vote, and 2/3 of the people who vote have to say yes. I honestly don't think any of this is controversial. Well, they're going to get stuff in their own inbox as well. But yes, we're happy to share information about why it's important. And part of the thing is, from my perspective, one of the ways I would explain it is that membership has its privileges, but it also has some responsibilities. And the Eclipse Foundation is one of the only organizations that's set up as a trade association where committers are considered members as well. And I think that that's been a big part of our success over the years. I can tell you that the elected committer reps that we have on the board are invaluable in helping us guide our decisions. And so, but once a decade, we have to go to everybody and ask them to spend a minute to do this. So I don't think it's a big ask, and hopefully we can get everybody to do it. I'm happy to have your advice on how to better shape the message. This is really important. All caps. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yes, that's a good point. A failure to vote is a failure of our system. Is a bit like it basically. That would be a bad idea. Yeah, I saw what you did there. Thanks. I thought you were a friend. Any other questions for me before I hand the baton over to Wayne? All right. And should I just mention the one change to the IP policy that doesn't have slides? So there's one. These didn't have time. There's one additional change beyond what Wayne is about to talk to that doesn't actually matter to most of you, but we did change the IP policy in a way that for many licensing decisions, it's now a 2/3 supermajority rather than a 1/3, rather than unanimous. So in particular, because we're part of the Java ecosystem, we deal a lot with code that's under the GPL plus class path exception. That's the default license for OpenJDK. So now if we want to approve a project to be either consuming a third-party artifact using that license, or actually a project that is using that license itself, that would require a 2/3 supermajority rather than unanimous. And with that, thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. So I'm going to apologize to the video guy. I move around a lot. So I'm here to talk first about some of the changes that we're making to the IP policy. I'm going to I'm going to not talk about it in terms of the policy too much, and rather focus on some practical examples. I don't think I call what I'm going to show code, but there's some screenshots of me working on the command line to sort out dependency stuff. And again, just to give you a flavor for how we see this falling together. So first off, with regard to project code, and one of the changes that we've made is we've changed the definition of distribution. The old version, the old IP policy described distribution as basically anything that anybody can obtain from any repository ever. So every individual Git commit was considered distribution. One of the implications of that is that projects that came to the Eclipse Foundation had to cut off their history. And this is actually a bit of a problem for our IP team. When our IP team goes and looks at content, for example, if they notice that history is missing, that's a bit of a red flag for them. So we were creating our own red flags. So projects that come now will be able to retain history because, again, we don't consider the Git commits of the past to be forms of distribution anymore. And I think that's a big deal. It's actually, this was a bit of a barrier for projects moving to the Eclipse Foundation. One of the questions was, can we restore our history? Those of us that have had it lopped off, talk to me. Hey, I'm willing to negotiate. Third-party dependencies, we are switching to, those of you who are familiar with our current policy, we have these notions of type A and type B, which is a level of due diligence that we apply to third-party content. Type A was license certification. Type B was far more detailed, where we would do a deep dive on every single bit of content. Traditionally, we did what we now today call type B on everything. And the idea is that the IP team would have to invest considerable time and energy to investigate third-party content before a project team could leverage it, which means that project teams wound up waiting, in some cases, weeks before they could use content. So with type A, that became quicker. What we're doing is we're going to be switching to type A. Everything is license certification, and instead of looking at every little thing, we are going to spend time investigating those things that require investigation. One of the things, we ran a quick scan of our history of third-party dependency scanning, and we found on the order of about 3% of the time we found problems in third-party content that needed to be mitigated. So we're going to focus on that 3%. Which I think is a good thing overall. And already we've discovered certain things. We found some proprietary codecs in Electron. So hey, that was fun. So again, when we detect shenanigans, we're gonna dig in instead of focusing on everything, because focusing on everything is not focus at all. We're going to put our focus on bills of material overall. So we're going to allow project teams to generate a bill of materials, and based on the bill of materials, which uniquely identifies all of the different bits and pieces, and I'll show you what this looks like in a second, focus on that holistically, which are going to allow us to do things as well, like do a better job of managing vulnerabilities. When vulnerabilities are detected in dependencies, we're going to be able to work with the project teams or help the project teams mitigate that kind of thing. The notion of piggybacks and add to orbit are just going to go away. In fact, if you're a committer and you understand what that means, you can just stop making piggybacks now. Just don't do it. I'm going to blog this later today, or likely tomorrow. Parallel IP becomes the standard right now. Again, for those of you who understand our process, parallel IP is something that we apply in a couple of different circumstances. We are applying it across the board. The idea is, if in those cases where the IP team needs to investigate something more deeply, they will do a quick look. They'll give you like, hey, you can start using this, but it's going to take us a little bit more time to do a full investigation. We'll get back to you. Again, that only applied in a couple of different cases. In certain other cases, you just had to wait before you get any approval to use it. Parallel IP will apply across the board. And again, as I said, there's only going to be 2 cases moving forward. Again, in practical terms, those of you that have been doing this sort of thing, interacting with us, there's only going to be 2 cases where you have to create a CQ moving forward. In cases where we need to do further investigation and if there's cryptography involved. Possibly. We're still sorting that out. There may be a need to register a CQ for a works with dependency, but I haven't quite sorted out what we're going to do about that. Well, that's a works with as well. So yeah, so that would be the same. The thing is that by doing this bill of materials focus and focusing only on license certification, I expect that most of the needs for works with and build and test only just disappear anyway. Yeah, great. Did that answer that was the question? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so there will be, so in that, so I would lump that, sorry, maybe I'm generalizing too much, but I would lump that into the needs investigation category, because again, I think most of them just go away anyway. The general idea is over here on the, on your left, we have a bill of materials that gets generated from the project. I'm hopeful that we're going to have some automation in the form of plugins for Maven, for example, NPM, Gradle, we're going to be leaning pretty heavily on the community, the Architecture Council in general, to help me with this sort of thing. But the idea is you start with this bill of materials, and again, I'll show you what this looks like in a second. Fire this to a service. The service checks various sources of information to determine what the license information. So what we're doing is we're going from the identity of the content. We're not going to be scanning entire source code libraries. Instead, we're going to be leveraging the work of our own work and the work of others who have done those scans and have already figured out for an Ebit piece of content what the license status is. We're going to be leveraging those sources of information, using them to generate a bill of materials that includes license data, and those things for which there is potentially some confusion, we don't maybe perhaps haven't sorted out what the license is, those are the things we bring to the IP team. They do their review, they feed those responses back, their results back into the system. Next time you run, it just comes clean. So the idea is that we're going to put these tools in the hands of committers so that they can run them anytime. So as soon as you start using some third-party dependency, you run your build, you determine that maybe something needs further investigation, we get the IP team on it right away to sort that out, or you run it and everything comes out clean, you're good to go, you just keep moving. At the end of your development cycle, there's still going to be a requirement to submit an IP log. The IP log will effectively be, at least part of it will effectively be just this bill of materials. We'll do a quick look at it, but by that point, you should have already run this tool a handful of times. This should just be me going, all right, rubber stamp. Question?
So this clearly has a potential being integrated in the CI process.
Absolutely.
However, if I do that and it runs nightly, for example, then it is based on a commit that is already in the repository.
Yes.
So based on the former definition of what distribution is, I would have already distributed stuff that might be in violation of policy.
Correct.
However, now you're saying that is okay. If we find something that is not okay, we simply revert the commit and that is fine.
Actually, no. Just keep going. So if you find something that you're not sure about in that build, send it over to the IP team. Just keep doing what you're doing, but send it over to the IP team. They will investigate. And now if they find a problem and it just cannot be resolved, they will tell you. At that point, you would have to revert it, right? Right. So it is, yeah, right. So the definition of distribution was changed to content that is included in a release, right? So basically your commits up until the point where you say, yes, the content in my repository at this point constitutes my release. At that point, everything needs to be clean. Oh, I'm so happy you said that. Even if you provide snap, yes, absolutely. So milestone builds are not releases. That is important, yes. Milestone builds, according to the Eclipse development process, are intended for limited distribution, right? You should not be using milestones to give, to go to your general community. If your general community happens to find them, then there's nothing I can do about that. But the intention is that is for, milestone builds are for basically for people who are your consumers to just be prepared, get ready for your release, right? So they don't constitute an actual release. Yeah, I gotta move along. We have Sharon's doing an entire talk about this at 11:15, and I'm around, so pick my brain. So again, in practical terms, basically, I've been doing this. I've been running your Maven builds for all these projects that have been releasing, generating a dependency list. From that dependency list looks something along, something along these lines. Is basically just Maven coordinates. I run them through my this prototype tool I've created. What it does is it converts Maven coordinates into clearly defined coordinates, uses our existing IPzilla data, uses an open source project, community-driven project for that collects license data called Clearly Defined. Again, I can talk all about this, as much as I want about this later. Determines the license and whether or not it is approved for use with your project. So it generates, this is basically the output of this prototype I've been working on. Attending a session on Community Day, there's a lot of other work going on in the community about this. We're going to adapt all of this to be to align with work that other people are doing in the community, right? So we're gonna roll our own based on our existing tool set for the immediate rollout, and then in 2020 we're gonna look at this again more about working with working in a way that's similar and compatible with how everybody else is doing this. Again, I'm being told I got to move. So basically, in this case, I've got the tool right now actually works with a package lock file as well. And in this case, we found an NPM dependency that was listed as restricted. In that case, you need to take that up with the IP team. Okay, moving on. Basically, we are here in our process. We're going to be updating the IP process itself over the next month or so, hopefully working towards the end of the year. And then at some point in the 2020, replace IPzilla and our entire tool chain with regard to intellectual property management. Again, Sharon's going to talk about this in gory detail in her talk. I'm way over? Way over. So moving quickly. 30 seconds. Simultaneous release. We're stabilizing in terms of projects and work. We haven't been adding too many new projects. We added one last quarter, but we tend to be again, everything seems to be stabilizing. We have a healthy influx of proposals. Next quarter, this bar is going to be a lot higher. We've been really working hard to bring proposals to a point where they're ready for community review. And just a list of some proposals we got in third quarter. The Eclipse Che for Z is interesting, basically mainframe Che. Oh, seems cool. And thank you so much to the members who have been contributing to Eclipse Foundation projects.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Paul Buck, responsible for community development, and I want to spend a moment talking to you about working groups. So our roots are in open source. Along the way, we also introduced working groups, which is a way for members and companies and organizations to collaborate in an open source style and produce innovations in the area of specifications and working together to align on industry outcomes. Underpinning a working group is a charter, a participation agreement, and a website, and other aspects. The charter outlines the scope of what the working group is going to set out to do, and the participation agreement formalizes the relationship of the member company into the group, and as well as solidifies the IP framework. Mike went through a number of the working groups this morning already in his introductory presentation. I just want to bring your attention to the working groups that are in the proposed status right now. We're actively recruiting for both Edge and Sparkplug, both key and important new areas that are spinning out of IoT. So if you have an interest in any of either of those two working groups, please let me know. We're very interested in new working groups. So if you are aware of like-minded companies that want to get together and collaborate on an outcome, then get to us, let us know. There's also a lot of information about it on our website on how to get started. And along the way, as we've been hosting and working with member companies on working groups, we've learned a lot about how to do this and how to do it effectively. Mike mentioned all of the recent working groups that got started in the automotive space. And what it's become clear to us is in order to do it effectively, we needed to introduce a stronger life cycle model, which we have. And we've also put more definition around the roles and responsibilities of initiating companies and companies that are coming in to form the working groups and collaborate. So it's really helped us help you move quickly through this life cycle and go from an opportunity phase where when we're working with an initiating company to getting the working group up and standing and running. And a most recent example of that is the Cloud Development Tools working group that Mike mentioned as well. So it's a great way to get together with companies, with other institutions and produce outcomes. So I encourage you, if there is an area of focus that you'd like to get together on, just let us know, and we'll be happy to jump into it with you and get it going quickly. All right. Thank you.
That's how you do it. All right, good morning, everyone. Probably 5 minutes. Oh, wow. Okay, that's how you do it. I'm Thabang, Mashologu. I'm the Vice President of Marketing. Good morning, everyone. So just to get us started, I wanted to recap on what we set out to do in 2019. I think first and foremost, we wanted to engage with all of our audiences, and that process began for us by segmenting our audiences, right? Knowing that we couldn't be all things to all people, so we actually purposefully and deliberately set out to understand what the needs and concerns and requirements were for developers versus for architects versus for CTOs and versus for non-technical decision makers. And to develop content and deliver the right type of information through the right channels, so the right websites, the right social media platforms that would provide that information effectively to those audiences. The other aspect involves the membership, so you, and knowing that really for us to be successful, it's not about a small, underfunded marketing team, but it's actually leveraging all of you and your respective channels, your networks to get the story out. And I think most notably, I think for me, the thing that keeps me coming to work every single day, what's that? Is Kai's needs, exactly, number one. I've got a slide for you, Kai, actually two. But it's the fact that I get to tell and my team gets to tell success stories, right? So we have really focused on building out capabilities that allow us to share the stories of our contributors, our committers, of course, and also our members in terms of what they've been able to realize as business outcomes, delivering value to your respective stakeholders through your involvement and participation, active participation in this ecosystem and community. And then the other kind of major area of activity for us is to drive positive net growth. Essentially, I think we understand this intrinsically in terms of open source generally, that having more people on board makes for a more makes for a better code base and drives innovation and all of these things that these collaborative effects that we come to open source for. The same applies to our membership, right? So being able to invest our marketing effort and do a lot of things to ensure that we're acquiring members, net new members, but also retaining existing members, so we're minimizing the churn and attrition from our membership base. One of the many major areas of activity for us this year has been doing really a proactive press relations rather, and analyst relations strategy and execution. So we've done a lot more than this, but I think I just wanted to call out, we have this construct of the 4 pillars, being Cloud Native Java, being IoT and Edge, our automotive working groups, and tooling. So with that regard, some of the highlights over the course of the year, we put a lot of effort, and thank you to Andy and to Ralph and to everyone that participated in talking to the press, talking to analysts around the OpenADX working group launch. Jakarta EE8 was obviously a major milestone for not only our community, but for the industry at large. This gentleman over here in the front row did, something like 24 interviews between press and analysts. For several of those, he was deadly sick with a cold, but he persisted, and we had a phenomenal result. I mean, to be frank, that's probably the best result that we've had in 15 years in terms of press coverage. So being able to see that kind of deterministic relationship between the effort that we put in collectively as our membership and with the Eclipse Foundation and what we see in terms of media coverage. Similarly for our cloud native tools through Che and the ECD tools working group, we've been able to enlist through supporting quotes and through participation in our media outreach our members and see some good results and coverage there. We're doing a lot more in the way of measurement, so we'll try anything once, we'll experiment, and then we'll measure the results, and then if it's successful, we'll do more of it. Just to give you a sense, the fact is we've had the best year in several years in terms of coverage over the course of the year. So remember I started off by talking about segmentation and the fact that, I think one of the things that we do best in our community is really generate content that is intended for technical audiences. The Eclipse community newsletter, for example, when I started about 1.5 years ago, was 210,000 subscribers. It's now up to 350,000 subscribers. And that's, purposefully technical content. What we decided quite deliberately to do this year is also develop content that was directed at decision makers, non-technical decision makers in our audience, specifically to convince them why open source makes good business sense, and specifically why doing open source at the Eclipse Foundation or within this community is going to accelerate their innovation. It's going to drive a competitive advantage. So we did essentially an integrated marketing campaign around that. We interviewed several of you and featured those interviews in an ebook, in a social video series, and we delivered an infographic as well. We kind of, since this was new to us as a community, we set some what we thought were modest goals. We were looking for 5,000 downloads of the ebook. Within a month, we had hit 45,000, and to date, over 68,000 downloads of the ebook. So what does that give us? For one thing, awareness of the fact that there's a direct correlation between participation within this Eclipse ecosystem and business outcomes, and also the fact that it can serve and has served for us as a recruiting collateral, right? So it's something that we can actually give to people as we're trying to convince them to become members. 2 minutes, okay, good. Jakarta E8, similarly, we did a lot of work, and not only us within the foundation, but leveraging all of you to really highlight the major milestone that was Jakarta E8 through web and social and all of those good things. We did the Jakarta 1 live stream virtual conference. Again here, based on our virtual Eclipse meetups, By the way, a plug for those, if you have any message that you want to get out, any major announcements, any releases that you want to, please use and abuse that channel, the virtual Eclipse meetups. It's a great, great channel for you to do that. Typically, in that, we see maybe 50, 100 attendees to those virtual events. So we thought, you know what, this is going to be a major announcement. Maybe we'll get 200 attendees. We blew through that and got over 1,400 attendees. And just looking at the heat map, that was something that was really edifying and encouraging for us, because we were able to see, you know, a distribution in markets where we didn't think that we had a presence. But that was very encouraging. Community Vision ebook, another piece of collateral that we put together. Again, it featured voices from our community, so telling our stories in a way that really makes the technology more compelling and relatable. And in terms of membership recruitment, we've been working on various assets that allow you as our members to recruit other members in a way that really enunciates the value proposition of being a member of a working group, in this case, Jakarta EE working group. Just skipping through this. Adoption is one thing that we know is a challenge. Being able to see who's actually adopting our tech. We've implemented, and this is where we were absolutely thinking about you, Kai. We came, based on your requirements and feedback and things that we had heard from other folks, we've implemented this Iot Adopters Campaign, and essentially we allow anyone who's adopting our technology, whether they're a member or not, to submit their logos, and we put this up on iot.eclipse.org/adopters. It's something that we want to roll out to all of our technology areas. So look out for that, and also encourage your customers and stakeholders who are using technology that's out there from us to do so. And skipping ahead, lead gen. In terms of recruiting the members, I just wanted to end on this, is that we did something that was entirely new for us, which was essentially leverage our website as a way for generating specific leads for membership, net new to us. So far, we've had 23 leads come through. That's a small number, but it's because they're very highly qualified leads. If you complete this lead form, odds are you are very, very intent on becoming a member. And that actually is borne out by the fact that we've had a 10% success rate, which is high as far as marketing, this kind of marketing goes. And we've been able to drive around $50,000 of revenue purely through this digital channel. And that's new members, good for all of us. I am over time.
But you're not alone, other than Paul. So.
Thank you.
Gail, do you want to just do 30 seconds? Yeah, Thabang and his team have done a ton of work. This is a whole new area for us over the last 18 months. And so hopefully it's valuable. Feedback is welcome. And we're trying to work in many different areas. So please, that's a place to jump in. So.
Yep. Thanks, Paul. So I will be very quick and fast. So yeah, just to continue in the same aspects. So we need your help to recruit other members, because we think that existing members are certainly the best ambassadors of what we do. So you can connect us to your partners that should become members of the Eclipse Foundation. And you can just ask us. We can join you in meetings with your members. So we have several people in the team who travel a lot, and we can come with you to tell good stories about open source in general, and what we do at the Eclipse Foundation in particular. And about events, so in 2020 we'll have EclipseCon Europe here in Ludwigsburg. We are also working on doing more about around Jakarta One. So Thabang just mentioned the success of Jakarta One Live. So we are still working on what's coming next year. We also want to do more in terms of smaller events, in terms of demo camps, Eclipse days, participation to Java user groups, local meetups. So we have a budget for that. So if you organize something in your city, and just let us know, and we can pay for the pizzas or for the beers, and we can also send somebody to say a few words about the Eclipse Foundation. And we already have successful virtual meetups in IoT, Jakarta, and I think that with what we demonstrated with Jakarta One Live is that this kind of online conferences is also very valuable for both our members and the community at large. And that's all for me.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So I'm Philippe Krief. I'm working as a research relations director at the Eclipse Foundation. I will be brief as well. I wanted to show you the team and introduce you one new member who is here. Marco, where are you? He's here. Yeah, Marco is here. New member who joined us because Maria Teresa, that you certainly met her last year, she moved to Mexico. But she's still helping us remotely. And somebody who was used to stay also in shadow is Susan EY, who also helped us a lot on the research project. So here you can see the research team, and we have several other buddies helping us in Europe and, of course, outside of Europe. So how they help us? They help us because we have lots of different research projects, and I wanted to show you, just give you an idea of sort of repartition, how they are organized in IoT area, in tools area, and cross-domain area. You identify three new projects, and four projects to finish it this year or last year. And also, so if you want to have more details about that, we have a booth, and I will mention that later. But also, I don't want to go in details on each of them. Wanted to show you also that we are answering to several proposals. So every year we answer to at least 10 to 12 different proposals. So it's lots of work for us. And we always try on this proposal to invite some members of the foundation if we can, because if we are early involved, usually the consortium is looking for new partners. So they ask us, based on the profiles they are looking for, we try to identify some members in Eclipse and get in touch with you. So we do that regularly. So if you are interested in being part of this kind of European project, just let me know, and I will keep this information in our folders. And so you see that the coming proposals are in different areas. Again, in IoT, of course, smart village, smart mobility. I cannot tell you more about that because I have NDA on this kind of project for now. But we start also having some more active project in AI, and a very cool one in resilience. And I would love to be, if we could win this one, and some other one about a new domain, very interesting domain about behavioral types. So about APIs and how API are used in different projects. So it's very interesting as well. So lots of good things going on. So here where we are located, so we are just in front for part of the project where there is this IoT playground. We have a couple of our projects here, and several other guys as well who joined the IoT playground. And we have a huge wall with all our roll-ups, so you could not miss it. And please come on, and we are here to present each of them. I can pitch on some of them, and we also have the of course, are the people from the project who are here to talk about their project. So they are happy. They will be really happy to talk to you and to collaborate with you if there are some opportunities. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, the guy who speaks last after 8 people always gets his time cut, right? So that's me. And I won't go through a bunch of slides here. I'd rather spend just the last 2 minutes to wrap up and talk about, across the board, our team is working hard. We're doing a lot of new things, right? And you just go group by group by group. We're trying to do new and innovative things to respond to what you folks need, right? And because we're here to serve, right? Serve our community and help you be successful in what you're trying to do, both in your projects and with your businesses. And so, you know, we deem all of these things as member services. And so what we would really like is two things: feedback and then input, right? Helping us amplify the things that we're doing. That's what we ask back from you folks. So I hope this has been a useful session. I guess I'll open up the floor. Are there any questions before we wrap up? We only have a few minutes, but feel free to fire away. No? Okay. Well, thank you very much. We really appreciate you attending. I will tell you, for those who are new, this is the largest crowd we've had for a members meeting. So we appreciate you coming. We'd really like the feedback. So thank you.